Yes, folks, hello, welcome once again to Monetary Games and Collectibles. It's time for another action figure review here on the channel. And as you can see in front of you right now, today's installment is going to be taking a closer look at the new G.I. Joe Classified Series Wild Bill Retro Cardback Edition. So stick around, I'm going to give you all the ins and outs, ups and downs that you need to know. So if you've been thinking about picking up this Wild Bill for yourself, you'll have good, thorough information to make a decision. We'll kick things off by jumping back in time and taking a look at the packaging on the day it arrived on my doorstep. Then we'll get into Wild Bill himself, talk about the aesthetic and the visual experience of the figure, talk about the accessories and added value, discuss the articulation and the posability, and then pop him next to a couple of other G.I. Joe Classified Series figures to see how he fits within the collection. And with all that said and done, you should have plenty of information to make a decision as to whether this is a figure you want to crack your wallet or purse open for. So let's get into it, and let's jump back in time to visit past Chris, taking a look at the packaging on the day he arrived. Here we go. All right then, folks. Well, here is the retro cardback Wild Bill in packaging, and it's the standard G.I. Joe Classified Series retro, cardback with blister on the front. You can see the logo, the character name, William Wild Bill Hardy there at the top. Then we've got the artwork that's the kind of Hector Garrido style homage. That's not too bad, that one, actually. I quite like that. It's all right. But of course, the main event with the retro cardbacks is the blister pack showing off the figure and all the goodies. Then on the back, got the file card there with the biographical information in a number of different languages, the cross-promotion into the other figures in the Wave, the Grunt, and the Techno Viper, and all the legal bollocks at the bottom. And that's it. Retro packs are pretty straightforward. It is that kind of chunky, double-layered card thing that they like to do. You see plastic sections sit underneath the first layer of the card and then is kept in place on the back. But that's fine. I'm not minting box. But if you are minting box, there you go. There's your look at the packaging. So I'm going to dash off now, crack this bad boy open, get good and hands-on. Very pleased to have a Wild Bill in the collection now as a non-Dragonfly purchaser. Pose him up, take some pictures, get him next to a couple of other G.I. Joe Classified Series figures, and I'll come back with a few review thoughts. So stick around. Future Chris is going to come back and do that in 3, 2, 1. And let's kick things off by talking about the aesthetic and the visual experience with Wild Bill. And as always, I'm going to start with a head-to-toe look at the figure as he came out of the packaging. And broadly speaking, it's very heavily inspired by the original vintage figure. This is not one for the Sunbow cartoon fans with the blue and orange vest. This is one for the vintage figure fans and the comic book fans. He's much more aligned to this aesthetic style in the comic books. So he's got his flight suit on, but he's also then got his little kind of Western cowboy embellishments for that little bit of character personality, that little bit of flavour to give him some depth. I find the colour scheme a little bit interesting on this one. I must admit the browns and the greens kind of blend up a wee bit for me and make the kind of core body an initial look superficially a little bit bland. But then when you get into the finer details of it, it has got some interesting stuff going on. And of course, it's a practical decision in the sense of the colour scheme because he's wearing a pilot's green flight suit and he's just throwing his vest and his little man bag over the top and and that's it. But he's still got those lovely little elements like the cowboy boots and the holsters and everything in the mix there to give it that little bit more personality as well, that aforementioned personality. Out of the box then, Wild Bill comes hatless with his flash of red hair and his massive red stash there, his big old Major's mustache, which is part of his visual identity for sure. I think most people like myself will be going for the hat, which we'll look at in a little bit later in the video, because it's a big part of the visual identity. But nonetheless, the face sculpt is good. We've got good quality paint applications on the painted sections, like the mustache, the eyebrows, the eyes, etc. Good sculpt in the stash, good sculpt in the hair. You can see the hair detail in there. Nice facial features sculpted in, including this little kind of furrowed brow. Although if you look very closely, you can see I've got a little bit of paint rub that's come off the back of the sunglasses I've been using, which are not the ones out of the box, to be honest. Just to quickly defend Hasbro there, that's me who's done that. It is a bit of a vanilla expression. Would it have been nice to have had a head swap with a good yeehaw shouting face in there? Yes, it would, but overall it serves the purpose. Moving further down into the figure, you can see he's got his brown vest here, and then the straps across the front holding his little man bag. One thing that did stand out to me almost immediately was that the skin tone of this little bit of chest that's poking out the top of his flight suit there does not match the neck and the head, which is a wee bit of a shame. But then the sculpted detail in here is nice. The vest has got, that leathery effect. He's got the shoulder pads on there, got the little his buttons and such like, little stitching details on his knife sheath, and then that slightly darker brown of the leathery effect of his man bag strap, and then the man bag itself is all good to see. He's not quite as detailed or doesn't have as much paint applications as the Dragonfly version of the figure. The Dragonfly version of the figure had a lighter brown colour on the shoulder pads. The man bag was in black, and then I think, if I remember rightly, someone correct me in the comments if I'm wrong, I've done that thing where I've not checked before I started talking. I think there were some little touches like the buttons were painted. There were paint applications on the buttons. But still, nonetheless, nice texture detail, good creasing, and then you can see the body underneath has got sculpted details on the flight suit and things like little creases and bunching up, which I'm always a big fan of. Then down into his belt, he's got the painted symbol at the front here, the buffalo skull in a nice silver look. Always a big fan of that on the front of the belt. And then the ornate details in the leather work across there. Around the back, you can see the longer strap, no paint application on the buckle there, which he did have on the Dragonfly figure, and no paint application on the buckle at the top there as well, which I think was also on the Dragonfly figure. And then the holsters themselves have got this kind of leathery effect on them too. When this was first revealed, I remember a lot of folks pointing out that the holsters were in the reverse, in the cross-draw style. From what I gather, from what I understand from various Facebook posts and some of my Joe Bros on the front line, this was fairly standard back in the day for horse riding. It was easier to cross-draw your weapons and wear them this way so that you could sit on your horse, and I assume that's the same for Wild Bill getting himself into his helicopter seat. He's got a couple of insignias on this shoulder here. You've got this little grey patch there with the 4 stars and the symbol in the middle. And then on the other side, the other shoulder, we've got the slightly darker one with like a Wild Bill inside a flight symbol, and more of the flight suit kind of sculpted details like pockets on the arms and such like. And this one's wearing green gloves. Again, I think the Dragonfly version of the character had different colour gloves. So that kind of symmetry that the different colour gloves gives it is missing here because it just seems like one long piece of green. But still nice to see a little splash of colour with the insignias on the shoulders. Down into the legs again, flight suit sculpted details. So you've got things like the fly pockets and all the various zips and whatnot. Nice little kind of boot cut vibe coming out there over the top of the cowboy boots, with little creases and bunched up details in there as well. The green tones differ a little bit from the top of the hips to the thigh, to the knee, to the bottom of the leg here, which is a wee bit of a shame, but it's negligible. When you're taking the whole picture, you don't really notice it. That's just classic Toy Trooper picking out fine details for the purposes of a review situation. And then, of course, he's got his signature cowboy boots. Again, nice leathery brown looking effects there with the heel on them. And the square front toe, which is a nice aesthetic touch. And again, another contributing factor to that kind of theme, that little personality theme of the Wild West cowboy dude. So overall, aesthetically, yeah, thumbs up. There's a few minor criticism I have about the way the colours blend and some of the finer details that we got from the Dragonfly figure are not here in this retro version. I suppose that only bothers me because I didn't buy the Dragonfly, but then equally, I think it's important to make sure that your Haslab version of the character does have that little bit of extra vavavoom, that little extra moi, compared to your kind of on-the-shelf retail version. So fair's fair on that front. I just want it all, But there's certainly no mistaking who this is. If you're a classic G.I. Joe fan, the character, boom, there you go, stands out. And it's a nice upgrade on the vintage look. It's not enough of a reinterpretation to really make me go, ooh, wow. But it's solid. Yeah, rock solid, good, solid slab of G.I. Joe classified with lots of fun to be had. So yeah, thumbs up with perhaps a small deduction for some of the smaller criticisms. But overall, yeah, enjoying him for sure. Definitely a good visual experience. All right, so there's the aesthetic and the visual experience. Let's now take a look at his articulation and posability, shall we? And as always, folks, I'll start by saying that Wild Bill here comes with a super standard G.I. Joe Classified Series articulation scheme. So if you're not interested in the articulation section of the review, then I'll put chapters in, use the timestamps, jump forward to the look at the accessories and added value. However, if this is the first ever G.I. Joe Classified Series review you've watched, or you want to know if there's any particular quirks with this character, stick around, I'll walk you through it, and we'll get started up top with the head. So Wild Bill has a ball in the base of the skull, ball in the base of the neck, so he goes down that far, goes back that far, full 360 X-assist, and then you can tilt and swivel and use the ball at the top for extra range of motion. Coming down into the shoulders, Wild Bill's got a butterfly joint, a peg, and a hinge. So you've got a bit of shuffle back and forward on there, then a full 360 all the way around, and you can tee him out up to there. Little personal side note, the butterfly joint here on the right-hand side was really stuck out to heat that up loads, whereas this side, out the pack, nice and loose. Pinless double elbow, that'll get you up to there. The cut here isn't articulation. I think this is where they've swapped out the long gloves for the shorter green gloves at the bottom there. But he is pegged in at the wrist, so you can move at the wrist, and these two hands have both got up and down hinges on them. Wild Bill's got the hinge and the ball joint in the torso area, good crunch forward, reasonably good crunch back, and then all that swivel and motion in the ball joint at the waist. Hips and groin are the drop-down joint there, and you can get forward up to here, and then Russian ballet him out to there, and probably could get further if the holsters weren't getting in the way. Swivel at the top of the thigh, pinless double knee, that'll get you up to there. And then down in the feet, there's a swivel joint underneath the trouser leg there, like so, and then the classic hinge and rocker on the feet themselves. And that movement is a little bit obscured by the way this sort of boot cut drapes down on the top by the trouser leg, but not too much. Notice how they've not gone right down to the top of the shoe, so you can still get you forward nicely done in there. So yeah, articulation's fine, thumbs up. Certainly no areas in there that are wildly off scheme to what you usually get with your G.I. Joe Classified series. I was taking some photos with him a couple of days ago and wasn't finding the articulation problematic for anything I wanted to try and do in terms of posing the character up. So all good on that front. I suppose the only thing I will point out is that the butterfly joints are quite small, and with the cross-draw holsters, I would have liked to have been able to kind of get his shoulder a little further forward and swung a little bit more to put him in sort of cross-drawing poses. But that's about the only thing that got in the way of what I was trying to achieve. Otherwise, everything's rock solid. Thumbs up. So there you go. There's the articulation posability. All right, let's now take a look at his accessories, shall we? And we'll get things started with the hat, which is obviously, as I mentioned before, a signature piece, a key part of the visual identifying features of Wild Bill. Although it's not just a hat, it's a hat and a hair swap. So you pop the hair off and you have the hat and the little hair piece there, and you can see it kind of clamps down into the grooves like so. We've seen this before in Classified, Shipwreck, Lady J, etc., etc. That's a good classic Stetson. Is it a Stetson, folks? But it's in this nice blue, obviously the blue that Wild Bill, again, is well known for, and it also adds a little splash of colour to sort of interrupt that assault of green and brown that's going on, with the nice brass embellishment to the front with the cross swords and the little dangly tassels and what have you, and a lovely little kind of leathery effect in the hat there too. It sits nicely on the profile. It's a little bit high up, but that's okay. Got good contours, good shape, good size. Yeah, everything's all A-OK for such a key part of Wild Bill's personality being spoken to through his clothing. Then we have the sunglasses, another key part of the visual kind of identifying features of Wild Bill. The retro cardback version here comes with the silver shades with the silver lenses, where the Dragonfly, I think if I remember right, came with the gold frames with the black lenses. It's fine. I mean, I think some more folks would associate the silver frames more than the gold frames, but that's fine. The glasses are a bit annoying. We've seen this before with G.I. Joe Classified. First things first, even though there's nice grooves in the hairline to put it over the top of the ears, I'm finding the arms aren't long enough. Which is weird because I've seen some photos other people have taken and I feel like their arms are long enough, so I don't know what's going on there. Somebody said maybe mine have been warped in the packaging because they'd experienced it too. And they're just a bit loose and wibbly wobbly. Look at how high up that one sits there to get lined up. So they are a bit of a fidget, and you will have to finesse these quite a bit to get them where you want them to be. After the review's done, I'll apply some heat and what have you to see if I can get it to where I want it to be there. But certainly a key part of the identity. If you go and have a look at my posts or jump over to my Instagram, you'll see I've been experimenting with some other glasses I had in the bits box, which I think are a little bit of a slightly better fit for my personal preferences. But certainly you can't have Wild Bill without the shades. Sunglasses are just one of the things that G.I. Joe Classified can't quite get right. And if they did, this has been going on since like Buzzer and stuff, hasn't it? It's a real shame. And I think also because of the way the hat sits on there with the hairpiece, you can't kind of get the glasses just right and then pop the hat on the top to sort of lock them in place like you might do with, say, Sergeant Slaughter. Because the hairpiece is there, you're trying to finesse it underneath, from the underneath like that, if you get what I mean. Which I think might be a part of the issue there, that if I had a bit more kind of room to work, and didn't have fat sausage fingers that are really clumsy and impatient, then I'd get those glasses looking better. So there you go, there's the shades. Then Wild Bill comes with a pair of 6 shooters. These are fine, obviously, in terms of weapon of choice. Align well with the character's personality, theme, and with the vintage design. These are fine. The metal sections of the guns are a little bit plasticky, a little bit grey plasticky. I'd have liked a slightly more metallic look. We've got the nice white handles on there with the little star symbols sculpted in to give it a little bit of depth and flavour, so they're okay, and they certainly, again, add to the visual identity of the character. And as mentioned before, you've got a holster on each side that you can slot those in. Again, they're in that kind of cross-draw style, so you have the handle out to the front like so. Then Wild Bill's got a little knife, pretty standard. I'm fairly sure we've seen this before in the line. It's got the grey blade and then the brown handle. Again, the blade is not painted, so it's got a kind of plasticky look to it, but there's not a big surface area to make that stand out too much. And then the brown handle's fine with some sculpted details in there. So all good and dandy. And that's got a sheath on the vest there. You just pop that in like so. And then last on the list, folks, is the standard retro card back foot stand that comes with all the figures. Obviously, this one's got the Joe motif stamped into it because he's a Joe character, but we've seen this several times before. The black shiny plastic with the 2 pegs and the logo cut into the design. So, yeah, fine. All good and dandy. I've said before, foot stands, things like that should come as standard, really. But for those who like to display their figures, using foot stands. So there we go. So the accessory selection's all right. Yeah, I mean, it's certainly in line, on theme with the character, adds to the storytelling and the thematic personality of Wild Bill. No issues there. The glasses are a bit annoying, but it's fine. You just got to fidget with them a bit to get them to where you want them to be. It's a bit light. I don't know what I would have wanted in addition. Perhaps, like I said before, a yeehaw head swap or something wouldn't have gone amiss. But I'm just greedy. I want more accessories all the time. But I'm not sure what I would have wanted with Wild Bill that was on theme. So, I'm going to give it a 10 o'clock. I'm going to give it a 10 o'clock. It just feels a bit light. But then in the pros column, it's most of it's got on-figure storage, certainly the weaponry and such like. The hat's great, adds a lovely splash of colour. So, yeah, 10:30. 10:30. I'm good. There you go. So there's the accessories rundown. Okay. Right, let's now take a look at Wild Bill next to a couple of other classified characters, shall we? All right, let's get started with the predictable comparison here. There's Wild Bill with Sundown, just really expanding the Wild West themed Joe team members. I wonder if Sundown's brother will ever get done as a unique character and he'll have a kind of Wild West vibe as well. Time will tell. I've not really mentioned this much through the review, but one of the reasons I was so eager for a retro re-release of Wild Bill outside of the Dragonfly is because he's a member of the Action Force International Heroes. Fun fact, my Wild Bill was born in Hull, here in England. But in any case, here he is with the retro-carded Flint, who is also my leader of the Action Force International Heroes here at Mod Extra Towers. Here's Wild Bill next to Lifeline. Lifeline's not really that much taller. I've just posed Wild Bill where I've just grabbed him out of the box for a minute there and he's in a vanilla full standing pose. Here's Wild Bill with Leatherneck. I was just thinking back to comic book appearances of Wild Bill that I remembered, and there was that whole where they crashed in the jungle and then they'll get picked up by some river pirates or something. I remember now. And here's Wild Bill with Airborne, because you just know that this pair hung out in the mess. And I'll just finish up here with the retro Crazy Legs, another fellow Dragonfly retro reissue. Okay, folks, well, here's Wild Bill going around on the turntable. Give you a 360 look at the figure, and while you're eyeballing that, I'll offer up some final thoughts. And, Wild Bill here is an example of where the retro cardback reissue model can really shine, because it means you can offer an A-list ubiquitous G.I. Joe character in a Haslab, splash it up a little bit more, but then offer a slightly pared back version in the retro cardback for folks like me who don't go in on Haslabs, and everybody is ultimately happy. I mean, would I like the better gloves? Would I like the painted buttons? Of course I would, but the separation there is that you're getting something a little bit more special as a Haslab supporter, a Haslab sponsor, whereas I'm still able to get my hands on this kind of character who was featured heavily in the cartoon, featured heavily in the comics, and as I mentioned before, has a warm spot in my heart as a member of the Action Force International Heroes. So it works all round. The figure's got lots to like. It's certainly a good quality Wild Bill. The only real irritation I have is those bloody glasses, but I've got plenty of alternatives in the bits box, and I can get some heat on them and try and figure that out. So that's all fine. So it's good. It's a good quality, solid G.I. Joe classified figure. I've talked about this idea before. Some figures are just slabs of poof, there you go, there's some good solid classified, and this is an example of that. And he's a character that is so ubiquitous that who wouldn't want to have him in their collection? You know what I mean? Even people like me who lean more towards the more science fiction, fantasy side of things wants a Wild Bill because I remember him so vividly from the comic books. So there you go. So would I recommend? Yes, I would. The only thing I would have liked is some more accessories, and Hasbro going to Hasbro on that. So there we are. All right, folks. Well, I hope you found that useful. If you're thinking of picking a Wild Bill up, I hope I've helped you make your mind up. If I have, then do all the YouTube buttons and things that help your toy tuber brother out. In the meantime, thanks for watching, and have yourselves a great day. And swing back around for another video sometime soon. All right, it's been my pleasure to have you. Take it easy, folks.